we are going to carry on our discussion of this course with our new unit, and we're going to look at the Earth in balance. So this is kind of the geography aspect of this unit. So we're going to start today with our land issues. So what is going on with the Earth itself? It can be argued that land degradation affects more people and other living things more seriously than any other environmental problem. Our ignorance of this issue is not altogether a surprise, since the problem of land degradation not only visible, also land degradation is largely a rural problem, as most of us live in the cities. So land itself is one of those topics that is incredibly important, but not often discussed. It's detrimental more so than some of the other things. And I mean, all of these issues are huge to sustainability of Earth, but land degradation is one of those ones that is more so, but a lot of people don't acknowledge it as much as they should. So there are 4 categories of land degradation: erosion, chemical deterioration, physical deterioration, and desertification. Yes, there's a lot of terminology in this, and it's hard to follow. So, soil erosion. This is when we lose the nutrient-rich topsoil, either by wind or by water. Untouched land is generally not affected by erosion. Erosion of cultivated land, land prepared and used by plowing, is huge, and it does have erosion. Soil erosion becomes worse when hilly land is used for farming. So you'll see erosion if you picture kind of a beachfront and the waves hitting the shore. That's a form of erosion. And what the problem is, it's not that it's taking away all of the land, it's just taking away the part of the land that is nutrient rich, that allows things to grow in the land. So that is the issue there in terms of looking at soil erosion. And while nature does through wind and through water, the largest soil erosion is actually cultivated land. So plowing and farming and all that sort of stuff kind of pulls the land down itself. So this is an issue, and it's kind of a bigger issue. So that is soil erosion. Land degradation, which is chemical deterioration, and this is the deterioration of soil from a few different ways. So first is leaching, and this is usually with areas with a lot of rain, and what happens is the nutrients are sucked out of the soil through the plants, where you have growing crops year after year after year. So they suck all the nutrients out of the soil. So like a leech, they leach it out of the soil. Salinization is an increase in the soluble salts in the soil, so to the point where the soil becomes toxic for plant growth. Salty soil you can't grow things in. Water used for irrigation carries dissolved salts, and then that leaves them in the soil when the water evaporates if it's not flushed and drained. And it can actually reach dangerous levels if your soil is too salty. So that is a big issue. Acidification, too many fertilizers makes the land acidic and unable to grow. And then obviously pollution, full-on pollution, just dumping from nearby industries, dumping waste into the soil, and it gets into the ground, and this becomes dangerous. It contaminates the soil. If you've ever seen a soil leak, an oil leak into the soil, and that makes that soil unusable. So it can be a very dangerous thing. So chemical deterioration is one of those things, and once it's gone, you can't reclaim the soil again. Loss of soil nutrients is a huge one. When it rains more than the soil can absorb, the rain actually washes away a lot of the nutrients in the soil. It just flushes them right out. Like we talked about, leaching, and then salinization. Too high salt is toxic, excess fertilizer, and pollutants. So those are all those things that we talked about. Physical deterioration is something that can happen to the soil via nature. So the land can become waterlogged. Too much water and you can't grow anything. In general, there can be too much water. Overwatering can lead to waterlogging, and this becomes unusable. Land can be compacted, If it's stomped on by machinery or animals over and over again, it can impact the land, and it can also subsidence. It can sink. If the water is removed from the water table, it can actually sink, as in this picture here. This is what happens when the water from the water table is removed and the land contracts in and sinks on itself and can't be used. So some causes of land degradation, we've got deforestation, obviously cutting down too many trees, overgrazing, too many animals on the land eating it, unsuitable agriculture. If you don't know what you're doing when you're farming, because yes, you do need to know what you're doing when you're farming, you can destroy the soil, and this becomes an issue. Overuse of natural vegetation, too many plants can be, and then of course urban and industrial pollution from cities and at various factories in the area can cause land degradation as well. So it's one of the big issues. So there's a big impact from this land degradation. Loss of production, 50 to 70,000 kilometers squared lost because of erosion, and another 20 to 30 lost because of salinization and waterlogging. Growth of cities is an issue. The bigger the city grows, the more land it takes up. And cities grow out most of the time, not always up. When they run out of ways to go out, they go up, but if they can go out, they will. Loss of productivity. The land that does not get lost does lose its ability to grow crops. After a while, waterlogging and salinization can reduce productivity 30 to 80% if you're trying to farm too much in too small of a space. There's a huge connection, of course, between the loss of land and poverty and conflict as well. Famines have led to civil wars in the past. If you can't afford to grow your stuff and eat, it can lead to conflict. There's no support, so you have to fight for your share. You have to fight for the food. So we see this as a big connection here. Huge global problem with solid waste management. And what do I mean by solid waste management? Just getting rid of your garbage. What do we do with our garbage? There are so many people throwing things out. In Toronto alone, there are 860 locations that used to be dump sites. And these have been decontaminated and built on, but decontamination does not always work. And what do we do? What do you do with your garbage? If you think about it this way, like what you throw it down a trash compactor, or you just put it on the curb, whatever it is. Do you take it to the dump? I have to physically take mine to a station where I have to separate out all my recyclables and put it into a waste, a garbage. So it's a big thing, the solid waste management. What do we do with all of our garbage? What are we doing with it? In North America, there are two main types. In rural areas, people simply dump their waste in holes. In urban areas, the landfills are better engineered to reduce environmental effects. The rural areas are getting better. I technically live in a rural area, and it used to be when I was a kid, you literally backed up your car and you threw your garbage out at the back of your car into a hole in the ground. That's exactly what it was. And then now you go and you take and you recycle, and everything gets kind of separated out and put where it's supposed to be. But it's still an issue. You can have multiple bags of garbage a day. I took 2 loads to the dump yesterday myself personally because I'm cleaning out my house and I'm trying to get rid of stuff, and there's just so much of it, and you just take it to the dump. In Europe and Japan, a lot of garbage is incinerated, which is fantastic. So that's less for the huge dumps. Japan actually has a wild recycle system. If you're ever interested to look that up someday, recycling in Japan is pretty interesting, and it's a pretty involved process. But even though burning it is a better way of getting rid of it, so there's not a physical presence, it's actually different problems because you're using energy to burn it, and also then air pollution on top of that. Waste management in your corn far periphery is very different. Some positive, some negative. For one, poor people just generally consume less than rich people, less garbage, period. The things that poor people buy typically have less packaging that must be thrown away. Governments in poor countries do not provide good methods of getting rid of garbage. It's thrown into dumps, not landfills. And it can be bad as being left on the streets, which you see sometimes in some of the far periphery countries. Waste materials are useful to people in near-poor and far periphery countries. Some countries actually rely on garbage for economic inputs. You do see this. People actually live in the garbage dumps sometimes, and then that's how they make their living, and that's what they do. So this is environmental protection in terms of how ideally to dispose of waste, and to do so in a way that would allow it to not affect the land itself. So how can we help this out in terms? So the thing are the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle, which have been talked about for years and years and years. Generally, there's a waste hierarchy here. The first is to avoid. If you don't really need it, don't buy it, don't consume it. Reuse if you can, recycle. Upcycle is a word that gets tossed around a lot. Like, you buy an old piece of furniture and you paint it, and now it's a new piece of furniture, right? Instead of just throwing it out and buying a new one. Recycle and reprocess materials if you can. Waste to energy, and then disposal of waste. So that's zero controversy. So when you actually physically have to throw stuff out, that becomes an issue. So reduce, create less waste if you can. This is called source reduction. So this is at the beginning. The use of packaging has increased over the last 100 years because people are buying things in single serves and that sort of thing. Some countries have actually very strict laws about packaging. A lot of places you can't buy plastic bags anymore, all because of this. So this is all called source reduction. Reuse if you can. If you can, reuse it again. Take it back. Recycle it. Recycle. Your blue bins. Take it out. Get rid of it. Do what you gotta do. So reconsiderations. We have to look at what's going on differently. We have to think about these problems differently. We've been thinking about them one way. The 3 R's have been around since I was a kid, but clearly they're not working as we seem to be over-consuming still. So we have to look at things differently. Diversion. Cities now aim to send less and less garbage to landfills. They want to divert as much as possible. Incineration, recycling, organics collection, etc. Some of these are the ways to do it. This is reactive, though. This means that we are doing something because of something else. This is the problem. We have to do this because there's no other option for us to do this. This is not proactive, this is reactive, which can be an issue when we look at these things. We need to be more proactive. Try to reduce waste before we have to deal with it. This is called extended producer responsibility, EPR. So that basically means that in terms of people putting out a need to think in the long run about how their product is going to impact the environment in this particular instance. The World Conservation Union, WCU, defines a protected area as an area of land or sea especially dedicated to the protection and maintenance of biological diversity of nature and associated cultural resources and managed through legal or other effective means. So this is an area of land or sea that is protected. So in 2003, 12% of the Earth's land was protected. It is actually more than that. Private land is not counted. There are many private reserves in Eastern Europe, Africa, and Central America that are looked after by private groups. 17 million square kilometers in US and China combined. Only 0.5 of oceans are protected, and most of this is on the Great Barrier Reef. So the ocean is still kind of a free Wild West, if you will, in terms of this. And this is an issue. And we'll talk more about the oceans when we get to talking about water. Okay, so that's it for land. And in terms of, try to keep it short and sweet for you, and in terms of the issues that we have with land. So that's it for this lecture, and I will see you guys in the next.